It started with a smile across the dinner table, a smile that told me she knew exactly what I was thinking and dared me not to admit it. I never planned on noticing her. That afternoon was supposed to be casual, just another visit to my friend's house, a backyard gathering, while the late summer sun stretched the shadows long across the lawn. The air was warm, touched with that golden haze that makes everything feel softer, quieter. I was setting down a bottle of soda on the patio table when I heard her voice. Low, steady, confident without trying too hard. I looked up and saw her for the first time, my friend's mom's best friend. She wasn't what I expected. She carried herself with this kind of effortless grace, like she didn't need to ask for attention, but still had it the moment she walked in. Her blouse was light, linen maybe, tucked neatly into her jeans. Her hair was pinned up loosely, and a few strands had fallen free, catching the sunlight like copper threads. When she noticed me, her lips curved into a smile. It wasn't rushed or polite in the way people sometimes smile when they meet someone new. No, this was measured, deliberate, warm in a way that felt like it was meant just for me. "Ah, you must be your name," she said. Her tone was soft, playful almost, like she'd already decided she knew something about me before I even spoke. I nodded, suddenly aware of my own posture, the way my hand lingered too long on the soda bottle. "Yeah, that's me." Her eyes lingered, just for a second. Longer than they should have, maybe, but long enough for me to notice the color, something between gray and green, shifting with the light. She turned back to the table, setting down glasses with careful precision. The movement was simple, ordinary, but I found myself watching her hands, the quiet elegance in the way she placed each glass, how her fingers brushed against the rim like it mattered to her that they sat just right. I told myself I was only being polite, observing someone I'd just met. But beneath that explanation was a hum I couldn't ignore. A pull, subtle but undeniable. Later, when the laughter around the table grew louder and my friend joked about something I barely heard, I glanced across and caught her watching me again. The same smile, faint this time, tugging at the corner of her lips. There was no reason for it. No reason for her to look at me like that, as though she recognized something I hadn't yet put into words. But in that moment, with the glow of the setting sun washing over the patio, I realized something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even spoken. Just a smile across the table, light and unhurried. And yet it felt like the beginning of something I wasn't ready to name. The sun had gone down by the time we all sat around the dinner table. The air inside was warm with the smell of roasted chicken, herbs, and a faint sweetness from the wine my friend's mom had opened. Conversation floated easily, my friend telling stories too loudly, his mom laughing at him, and her, sitting across from me, quiet but always listening, her smile curving just at the right moments. I tried not to watch her too much, but every time I looked up, I'd find her eyes lingering, as if she caught me before I could look away. At one point, my friend's phone buzzed. He sighed, excused himself, and disappeared down the hallway, still talking before he even left the room. His mom was in the kitchen, moving dishes around. And just like that, it was the two of us. The clatter of plates and silverware softened, the air stretching into a kind of silence that made me hyper-aware of everything. Her steady breathing, the way her glass caught the light, the faint perfume I hadn't noticed before. She leaned slightly across the table, resting her chin in her hand. The gesture was casual, but the way her eyes fixed on me felt deliberate. "You're quieter than the rest of them," she said, her voice low, calm. "More thoughtful, maybe." I gave a small shrug, trying not to look like I'd been holding my breath. "I just listen more than I talk, I guess." Her lips curved. "That's not a bad thing. Not many people your age do that." The words caught me off guard. Not just the observation, but the way she said them, as though she'd been watching me closely enough to notice. Then she tilted her head slightly, that faint, knowing smile returning. "Don't worry," she added softly, almost conspiratorial. "He won't know." For a moment, I froze. The words weren't heavy. She hadn't leaned in with some dramatic intensity. She just said it, like it was nothing, like a passing remark about the weather. But the tone was different. It was playful, yes, but also layered with something else. Something unspoken. My chest tightened, pulse quickening. I searched her face for the meaning behind the words. Did she mean my friend wouldn't know she'd noticed me? Or that she'd seen me noticing her? Her eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway, where my friend's voice still carried from a distance. Then back to me. She sipped from her glass, unhurried, almost as if she hadn't just dropped a line that felt like a spark striking dry wood. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to let it pass as some harmless joke. But the weight of it lingered. By the time my friend returned, I was still replaying it in my head. Her smile, her tone, the words that hovered in the air long after she'd said them. He won't know. And suddenly, dinner didn't feel like dinner anymore. It felt like the start of a secret I hadn't agreed to but couldn't ignore. A week passed before I saw her again. I told myself I wasn't thinking about it, that her words at dinner, "He won't know," hadn't taken root. But when my friend invited me back to his place, the first thought that crossed my mind wasn't about him. It was about whether she would be there. She was. The house was busier this time, neighbors and relatives drifting in and out, helping set up for some small gathering. The smell of fresh bread mixed with the faint sweetness of candles his mom had lit. And there she was, in the kitchen, a light summer dress in soft shades of blue, simple, but on her it looked effortless. The fabric swayed gently when she moved, brushing against her knees, and I couldn't stop myself from noticing. She saw me before I could even say hello. That same smile, measured, familiar, lit her face, like she'd been expecting me all along. "Back again," she said, her voice carrying over the sound of clinking glasses. I nodded, trying not to look too eager. "Seems like it." She laughed lightly, then brushed past me to set a tray on the counter. As she did, her hand grazed my arm. A fleeting touch, maybe accidental, maybe not, but it lingered in my mind long after it was gone. My skin buzzed where her fingers had brushed. The kitchen filled with chatter, but she made space for me near the counter. She asked questions no one else did. Not the usual small talk. She asked about my classes, my work, even the book I'd mentioned once in passing. And the way she listened, really listened, felt disarming. It was strange how comfortable I felt. Like I didn't need to exaggerate or hide behind some version of myself. She had this way of looking at me, steady and unhurried, as though whatever I said mattered. At one point, she reached across me to grab a glass. Her sleeve brushed against my hand, and for just a second, her wrist lingered close to mine. That small space between us seemed to hum with energy. I caught myself staring at the curve of her shoulder, the light in her hair, the small, deliberate motions of her hands as she worked. She must have noticed, because when I looked up, her eyes were already on me. She didn't look away. Instead, her lips curved into that same faint smile, the one I'd seen at the dinner table. A smile that said more than words could. Later, as people drifted toward the backyard, she stood by the doorway. I passed by, trying to act casual, but our eyes met again. Just a moment, just a glance. But it felt charged, like we were both holding on to a secret neither of us had chosen, yet neither wanted to let go of. And as I stepped outside into the noise and laughter, I realized something unsettling. I was already waiting for the next time. The evening was quieter than usual. The house, normally filled with voices and clinking dishes, had settled into stillness. A faint breeze slipped through the open screen door, carrying the smell of damp grass and the hum of crickets. I wandered outside to the back porch, half to get some air, half because I'd noticed she wasn't in the living room with the others. And there she was. She sat on the wooden steps, one leg tucked under the other, a glass of red wine cradled in her hand. The porch light caught the curve of her profile, softening the edges of her face. For a moment, I thought she looked younger, almost fragile, though the steadiness in her posture never left. When she noticed me, she gave a small wave. Couldn't handle the noise in there either? I smiled, easing down beside her. The wood creaked under my weight, and for a while, we just sat in silence, watching the faint glow of fireflies blink across the lawn. She took a sip from her glass, then sighed. "Funny thing about gatherings like these," she said, her voice low, thoughtful. "You can be surrounded by people and still feel invisible." I glanced at her, surprised by the honesty. There was no bitterness in her tone, just quiet resignation. "You don't seem invisible," I said softly. "Not to me." She turned her head then, her eyes catching mine. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, a small smile curved her lips, sad but warm. "You're kind to say that. But trust me, after a certain age, people stop noticing. Or if they notice, it's not the same. You become someone's mother, someone's friend, someone's safe presence in the background." Her words hung in the air, threaded with something she wasn't quite saying. I could feel it pressing between us, urging me to respond. "You don't feel invisible here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not with me sitting here." She blinked, her expression shifting, surprised, maybe, or just caught off guard. Then her shoulders softened, and she let out a small, trembling laugh. "That's the strangest thing," she admitted, setting her glass down beside her. I never felt invisible sitting here with you." The words sank into me, slow and heavy. My pulse picked up, the silence suddenly louder than the crickets. I searched her face, but she didn't look away. Her eyes held mine, steady and searching, as though daring me to see her the way she wanted to be seen. And I did. For the first time, I saw more than just elegance or composure. I saw her loneliness, her longing, her courage in admitting it at all. I didn't reach for her. I didn't need to. The closeness was already there, woven into her words, sealed in the silence that followed. That night, sitting on those wooden steps, I knew the line between us had blurred, and I couldn't tell if I wanted it to ever sharpen again. Rain had begun sometime in the evening, steady and unrelenting, turning the house into a cocoon of quiet. The kind of rain that blurred the world outside, leaving only the soft patter on windows and the occasional roll of thunder in the distance. Most people had drifted into the living room, voices muffled beneath the sound of the storm. I found myself in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, letting the warm water run over my hands. And then I felt it, her presence before I even turned. She leaned against the counter across from me, arms loosely folded, her gaze following my movements with a faint, amused smile. The overhead light cast a glow over her, catching the edges of her hair, making her seem softer, almost untouchable. "You're awfully helpful," she said, her tone light, teasing. I shrugged, drying my hands on a towel. "Someone's got to do it." Her smile widened, but it wasn't just amusement. It was curiosity, something quieter, deeper. She didn't move, and neither did I. The silence stretched, filled only by the rhythm of rain against glass. I turned to put a plate back on the shelf. It was higher than I expected, and as I reached, the plate wobbled. Before I could steady it, her hand was there, fingers pressing against the edge. Our hands touched, just the tips of her fingers brushing over mine, but the effect was immediate. My chest tightened, my breath caught. Her skin was warm, softer than I expected, and instead of pulling away, her hand lingered. Not long. Only a second, maybe two, but long enough to feel deliberate. When I glanced at her, she was already looking at me. There was no laugh this time, no quick deflection. Only her eyes, steady, questioning, as though she was waiting to see what I'd do next. The space between us felt alive. My pulse raced, every sense sharpened. The faint scent of her perfume, the sound of rain pressing harder against the windows, the heat of her hand so close to mine. I wanted to close the distance, to let the moment unfold. But then she inhaled sharply, almost like she'd caught herself. She pulled her hand back, just slightly, her fingers brushing away as though reminding herself of a boundary. Her voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. "We shouldn't." The words were meant as caution, but her eyes betrayed her. They didn't move, didn't let go of mine. I swallowed, my voice low, steady. "I know." And yet, neither of us stepped back. The storm outside raged on, pressing the world into silence, and for a breathless moment, it felt like the only thing that existed was that almost touch, the space where her hand had been against mine, and the unspoken truth neither of us dared to name. The house felt too full that night. Laughter spilled from the living room. Music hummed faintly from a speaker. The smell of food clung to the air. Yet even in the crowd, I felt her presence like a steady current, pulling at me no matter where I stood. I caught her eyes across the room once, then again. Each time, she didn't look away. There was no hesitation in her gaze now, just something quiet and certain, as though she'd made a decision. Later, when everyone was busy with conversation, she moved. Not obviously, just a light touch on my arm as she passed, her fingers brushing so gently it could have been imagined. But I knew it wasn't. "Come," she whispered, barely audible over the noise. I followed her through the back door, into the garden. The night was warm, damp from the earlier rain. String lights hung between the trees, glowing softly, their light reflecting off wet leaves. The sound of the party dimmed behind us, replaced by the quiet hush of the night. She stopped by the stone steps near the garden wall and turned to face me. Her hands twisted together for a moment before she let them fall at her sides. For the first time, she looked unsure. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," she said, her voice low, trembling slightly. "I keep telling myself to stop, to step back. You're younger, and people they'd talk. They'd judge." I stayed quiet, letting her speak, watching the way her shoulders rose and fell with each breath. "I don't want to be foolish," she continued, her eyes lifting to mine. "I don't want something I shouldn't." Her words cracked on that last sentence, and for the first time, I saw the fear beneath her composure. I took a step closer, careful, deliberate. "It doesn't feel foolish to me," I said softly. "Not once. Not for a second." Her eyes searched mine, as though she needed proof. "The way I see you," I continued, "has nothing to do with age. You make me feel alive, like I'm not invisible either." Her breath caught. A soft laugh escaped her lips, but it wasn't amusement. It was relief, fragile and trembling. She shook her head slightly, as though scolding herself for feeling it, but her eyes glossed with something warmer. And then, slowly, she reached for my hand. Not tentative this time, not accidental. Her fingers slid into mine, steady and deliberate, and the moment they closed around me, I felt her exhale, as if she'd finally let go of a weight she'd carried for too long. The garden was quiet, only the hum of insects and the faint music from inside. But for me, everything stilled. Her hand in mine wasn't just touch. It was a choice. And though her words had been tangled with fear, her fingers told the truth. She wanted this as much as I did. The garden had gone still, the storm long faded, leaving the air cool and damp. The faint glow of string lights shimmered above us, their reflections trembling in the puddles along the stone path. I sat beside her on the garden steps, our shoulders touching, her hand still resting in mine. Neither of us spoke at first. We didn't need to. The weight of everything that had been building, the glances, the near words, the almost touches, was there between our hands, threaded into the quiet. She leaned her head against me, gentle at first, then settling fully, as if she had finally allowed herself to rest. The warmth of her cheek against my shoulder, the steady rhythm of her breathing, it was enough to make my chest ache. For so long, I'd thought of her smile, the first one across the dinner table. Now I realized it hadn't been chance. It had been an opening, a door she left cracked for me to walk through. "Maybe," she whispered, her voice so faint I almost missed it. "Maybe he doesn't have to know." Her words weren't careless this time. They weren't about secrecy. They were about us, about courage, about choosing what felt right even when the world might not understand. I turned my head slightly, close enough to catch the scent of her hair, faintly floral, softened by the rain. "I don't care if anyone knows," I said quietly. "Not anymore." Her fingers tightened around mine, not with desperation, but with certainty. She lifted her head then, just enough to meet my eyes in the glow of the string lights. Her gaze was unguarded. The vulnerability she had tried so hard to hide finally laid bare. "You make me feel," she paused, searching for the words, "like I don't have to apologize for wanting something again." The honesty in her voice struck deeper than anything else she could have said. I let my free hand rest gently over hers, the simple weight of it grounding us both. "You don't have to apologize," I told her. "Not to me." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, filled with a quiet relief, as though the world had finally stopped demanding answers. We stayed like that, her hand in mine, her head leaning lightly against my shoulder, the night closing in around us. No rushing, no need to prove or explain. Just the two of us, steady, unhurried, breathing in the same rhythm. For the first time since that smile across the table, I understood what it meant. It wasn't a tease. It wasn't a secret. It was a promise. And sitting there in the damp garden air, her warmth pressed against me, I knew it was one I intended to keep.